All right. Hello, Laura, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Amazing. Amazing. Perfect. Well, apologies to our guests here. We got a little bit of a late start. It was technical difficulties on my side, so I apologize for that. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will be recording this webinar, so we'll share the full link out afterward with anyone who's here and also any other folks who registered. Um, And then after that, if or during today's webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat section here. I will make sure it looks like everyone has access to share with everyone. So I will keep an eye on that and can bring any questions to Laura after she's done presenting. So thank you for joining us. My name is Olivia. I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at the Boutique COO. We host webinars like this with experts from across different industries and different fields on a regular basis. Usually it's one or two a month. And our goal is to really kind of provide more equitable access to information across things that are even outside of the domain that we usually serve clients for. So, Laura, I really appreciate you joining us today. I would love if you could give yourself a little introduction, and then I'll hand it over to you and I can monitor the chat.
Okay, perfect. I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen now, I believe, if I can, and just walk us through. Can we see?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the session that I have for y'all today is called Rockstars Don't Stress, the Secret to Preventing Burnout. So really happy to be presenting this to the Boutique COO Network. Thank you for being here. Okay, I want to share the purpose from my lens, and then I'm going to say a little bit about who I am. But I feel like the session today is definitely bigger than who I am. So that's what I want to start with. And one of the things that we believe is that high achievers can beat stress without compromising on the really big goals that they have. And when you all do that, that is actually how we are evolving humanity. So, as far as me, I'm an organizational psychologist, which means that it's all about understanding, explaining, and predicting behavior at work. So, like, what are the things that are really contributing to how somebody is showing up, their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs? And then ultimately, how does that result in them being productive and accomplished and also fulfilled and joyful? My background from a professional perspective is I spent 7 or 8 years working for NASA. Sort of a sad start to my career, honestly, because the Columbia accident of 2003 inspired NASA to realize that they had culture issues and that there were actually self-awareness gaps that led people to make really bad decisions that led to the loss of the 7 astronauts on board Columbia's final mission. So I started there, my career there at NASA, and brought the same kind of ideas to them that I now bring to clients all over the world, which is really about the power of self-awareness and self-acceptance. So yeah, worked with NASA, worked with Disney, Yahoo, ADP, a whole bunch of amazing companies. And I've worked with a lot of really small organizations as well, the ones that really truly care about culture. But today is really about you as an individual human being. So I'm happy that you're here. And I want to actually get started with a story. And I'll ask you to think about, how old were you the first time that you realized that you were full of it? I was about 31, like when it really hit me. And I'm going to tell you that story, but I'm going to take you back to when I was younger for some context to begin. I think it was like middle school when I realized for the first time that I got straight A's, and I was like, oh, now nothing else is okay. Nothing else is enough. And I think I spent the vast majority of my life from that point forward just like feeling stressed out. Like whether it was pushing to go from like second chair to first chair oboe player, or moving from like fourth seat to third seat in like tennis on the varsity team. Like I was just always striving, always pushing, and I was always stressed. And it always felt like my stress was about everything that was going on outside of me, because it was always preparing for the next thing. High school is all about preparing for college is all about preparing for graduate school preparing for a job. Like it was always just the next thing that was stressing me out. In fact, when I was working on my dissertation for my PhD, so I was in school, which means I was taking classes, I was teaching classes, and I was working at NASA full time all at once. And my boyfriend was always wanting me to like make more time for fun. And I had assured him that it was only going to be like this until I finished school. And he believed me. But there was always some other thing that was just, lining up right behind it to stress me out. So I actually did finish school, did the wedding, house, like all the things that were just stressing me out. And so that kind of brings us up to this moment when I realized that I was full of it. So I'm 31. I've worked a full day at NASA. And now I'm sitting in my home office. It's like a Wednesday evening. And I'm working on my side business. And my husband comes to the door and he said, "Hey, Patrick and Kelly called and they invited us to go see a movie. Do you want to go?" And I'm barely looking at him. I'm like, "Oh, babe, I can't, I just don't have time." And he goes, "Come on, Laura, you never have time." And I was like, "I know, babe, but it's only going to be like this until." And that was the moment that I realized I have no idea what the end of that sentence is. Like, it's only going to be like this until when? Until I leave NASA? That didn't feel true. The business was pretty consuming until I hit like a certain revenue mark. That didn't feel real. Like, when was it ever just going to feel like it was enough? And it was this really catalyzing moment for me of just recognizing like, it's only going to be like this until I decide I want it to be different. And so that really kicked off a journey for me of figuring out, how do I navigate life as a high achiever without this constant stress that was wearing me out? And that's what you're going to learn about today. There's nothing magic about me. The concepts that I'm going to teach you are the same things that when I learned them, it just blew the roof open for me on my own growth and my own joy, which is so much more important than most of us give it credit for. So today, you're going to learn 3 things you probably never learned about stress. You'll learn the primary antidote to stress, and then you'll learn how to unwind the stress that's actually really slowing you down. So imagine for me that you can actually go from how you feel today, which is probably feeling stressed out, frustrated, overwhelmed, behind. I'm going to linger on that one for just a second and just ask you to reflect for yourself. Like, how many of you have felt behind or even said out loud, like, "Oh, I'm really behind"? This is a constant story that we tell ourselves. So what if you could go from feeling all of that to actually feeling calm, confident, relaxed, while still being super productive? That's what you're here to learn. Okay, so normally I do polls, but I'm a little bit worried about our time. And so I think I'm just gonna push past the polls for right now. But maybe just in the chat, if anybody is willing to share, like, what would you say? I'm gonna actually pop over to the next slide here. What would you say are stressors for you in your life? And so if you can, like in the chat, just kind of tell me anything that you feel like is a stressor, like when you think about situations in your life that stresses you out. Okay, so parenting, the political environment, finances, aging parents, planning for the future. Yeah. Okay, good. So just a few examples. That's perfect. Now, hopefully you've heard something that like resonates with you, where you're like, yes, that's also my experience. That stresses me out. The official definition of a stressor is here on the screen. It says something that causes a state of strain or tension. But as a psychologist, I actually challenge this definition. This is not actually what's happening for us when we're stressed out. And so the first thing that you'll learn here about stress that maybe you never really learned or internalized before is that there are no inherent stressors. So even asking you to think about what are stressors in your life is really giving power to those external things. But there are no inherent stressors. That means there's not any one situation that every human being on the planet would say, yes, that would stress me out. And this is true because you've been in situations, you've seen this before, where somebody is talking about something in their life and it's stressing them out. And maybe you're listening and like pretending to be compassionate, but inside you're like, okay, that's stressing you out. Like you're just thinking like, that's not that big of a deal. I don't know why you're letting that get to you so much. And pragmatically, someone's probably done that to you as well. I actually had a situation when I was working inside NASA. There was an office that was genuinely understaffed. And so most people in that office really were feeling a lot of stress because they had so much work and they had a hard time keeping up. And I remember asking each of them about their stress levels and how are they feeling? How stressed were they? And this one gentleman looked at me when I asked him about his stress. And he said, I used to be a cop and I used to get shot at. There's nothing stressful about this job. I was like, okay, I was like 26. And honestly, I hadn't really thought about that before. But for him, it was a non-event. Like, okay, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of requests to process. Like, it's fine. And literally, y'all, it could be an extreme situation, like literally the apocalypse. And you could still find people that are like, I'm at peace with that. So there are no inherent stressors. This is important because it really brings us to another thing that perhaps you've never learned about stress, which is stress is a choice. And this is always the part where I'm really glad that you can't throw anything at me. Because when I learned this the first time, I did not like hearing this. I had a very defensive reaction. I had a very resistant reaction because I'm like, okay, hold on, I'm stressed. And now you're trying to tell me that it's my fault. Rude. I feel attacked. Yeah, no, I did not respond very well to this until I was really able to internalize, what does this mean now? If stress is a choice, that means that I don't have to choose it, right? And so there's a very empowering way to lean into this. And I'll ask you even just at the highest level to reflect and think about this. Like anything that's stressing you out right now, if you just think about that, just even if they're choices that you would absolutely want to make again, just think to yourself, what are the choices that you are making to contribute to your stress? Choices that you're making to play a particular role, take on certain assignments, even choices like having a family, even choices like staying with your family, like not abandoning your kids or whatever, like things that might feel a little bit extreme to you. These are all choices. So I say this because this choice thing is true at a lot of levels, and this is one of them. So, okay, you could, if you wanted to feel less stressed, you could choose to do less. You could choose to be less of a high achiever, right? Just maybe if you have fewer expectations, people aren't really looking to you for things, you have more time to relax and sleep, your to-do list isn't so long, like maybe you'd feel less stressed out. But if you're honest with yourself, do you actually feel kind of more stressed out at the idea of doing less? Or more stressed out at the idea of being in fewer roles or having less? Because a lot of high achievers find that actually doing less creates its own version of stress. And you like to stretch yourself. You like to set high goals for yourself. And that is not bad. That is amazing. Because the secret here is that you don't have to unchoose this life to unchoose stress. You can absolutely be a high achiever without having to feel that daily grind that's so unpleasant. So stress is not external. So what is it really? Well, stress is actually based on the story in your head. Now, this is not the same as saying it's all in your head in a way to dismiss it, like it's not real. It's actually very real. Stress has been linked to all kinds of very real consequences for us. It can impact your physical health, like hormonal imbalances, increased risk of heart attack and stroke, weakened immune system, respiratory issues, and accelerate aging, elevated blood sugar, chronic muscle tension, digestive problems, like all kinds of horrible physical things. But it's not just physical, it's also impacting your mental health, mood swings, anxiety, decreased sleep quality, depression, memory issues, which also then impacts how you're showing up. It impacts your rockstar status. It actually makes you less effective. It impairs decision-making. It reduces your effectiveness in communication, reduces emotional intelligence, reduces trust. It makes you less productive, less focused. It's actually much harder for you to focus on other people when you're in a stressed out state. We all become a little bit narcissistic when we're in a stressed out state. And you are here to serve others. I know you are. Stress makes it harder to do that. also causes moodiness and irritability, over-controlling behavior. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back, over-controlling behavior, and emotional contagion. So people around you feel this as well. And all of this stress, if it really goes unchecked, it's going to lead you to burnout. That means emotional exhaustion, cynicism, depersonalization, reduced personal efficacy. That's a lot of jargon, but basically burnout means that you're completely exhausted at the end of the day. Like you are fully spent. You have nothing left to give. Depersonalization means you don't feel connected to that purpose. You no longer really feel like you know why you're doing what you're doing or why it matters. And that reduced efficacy means like the same energy in just isn't getting you the same results out. So burnout makes you a shell of who you are, and it's no way to live. A way to think about this is that stress is like your battery running low, and burnout is your battery running on empty. But it's not just stress that's based on the story in your head. Coming back to the true source of stress, it's not only stress. Every emotion that you feel is based on the story in your head. You're actually never responding to the world around you. Ever. You are only ever responding to the meaning you're putting on what is happening. And I'll give you a really simple example. So you can participate in chat or you can just think it. But if you're driving and you see a red light, what does that mean? Stop. And if you see a yellow light, what does that mean? Now, the yellow light can mean slow down. It can mean speed up. Yeah, maybe it depends on the day. Yeah, so as soon as we start to think about this, it's like, oh yeah, I put a meaning on a stoplight. Like at some point, this is something that I was taught. There's people in the world that have literally never seen a stoplight before. They have no idea what it means. There's also places in the world that have stoplights where they do yellow, not just before red, but before green. So we really are the ones that are putting the meaning on everything that's happening all the time. And that includes stress. So that means that stress isn't actually caused by those stressors. It's not actually caused by having a big workload or interpersonal conflicts. Stress is caused by what you think it means. So you want to be able to think that through. If you have too much to do, what is the meaning that you're putting on that? Maybe the story in your head is you're not going to be able to meet all your commitments. Or maybe you're like, no, I'll get it done, but it's not going to be amazing. It's going to be like mediocre. And that's probably not going to feel great. But it's a story that's actually driving the stress response, not the situation itself. So your mind makes the meaning, your mood follows suit. So stress is a choice. You don't have to unchoose this life to unchoose stress. Stress is based on a story in your head. You are the one that's actually choosing the meaning that your mind puts on the situation. But it doesn't just stop there. You have to actually go one layer deeper, which is that stress only happens if the story in your head challenges your self-concept. So in the example of the workload, if you have too much to do and you're like, I'm not going to meet my commitments, maybe that challenges your self-concept because your self-concept is, I'm a reliable person. I'm a rock star. I get things done. Oh my gosh, like what does this mean if I'm going to miss this deadline or if I'm going to submit work that's not amazing? When that challenges how you want to feel about yourself, that is the actual root of your stress response. I can give you a really simple example of this. This is a game called Ladder Toss. And I bought this a few years ago before I had a pool party. And I was playing, in the backyard with some friends, and like, I was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. I'd never really played before. If you've never played, you take the balls that are on the strings and, the ladders are like a certain number of feet apart and you throw three and you're trying to get the string to stick on the rungs and you get more points for higher and less points for lower. And there were times where I would throw all three and I would fully miss the ladder. Like I wouldn't even touch it. I was like, okay, it's like a gutter ball, right? And ladder toss. But it was so fun. Like I still had so much fun. Like it didn't bother me. I didn't care. I was just there to play. But I can contrast that with actual bowling. So like when I was a kid, I would go bowling with my grandma and she actually bought me my own bowling ball and I had my own bowling shoes and we would go bowling and like I wasn't very good. And so sometimes I would bowl and I would just get like gutter ball after gutter ball. And it would really stress me out, y'all. Like to the point where I'd be like fighting back tears, which is terrible. By the way, don't do that. Do not, do not hold in the tears. You want to let them out. There's actually stress hormones like cortisol in your tears. You want to let those flow whenever you can. It's a way for you to actually relieve stress. But back to the story. I felt no stress when I was bad at ladder toss, and I did feel stress when I was bad at bowling. Can you spot the difference in the examples? Right? Like in ladder toss, that's not about me. I have no sense of self-concept tied to that game. But with bowling, y'all, I had my own ball from my grandma, who I loved. Right? Like I was supposed to be good at bowling. Like there was some self-concept hit that I was taking with the bowling. So just a silly example, and I know I took it away from like the work context, but I'm hoping you're able to see that like this stress reaction is really going to only happen if the meaning is challenging your identity, if it's challenging your self-concept. So really, your inner critic is making up a story in your head about your own perceived inadequacies. They might not even be actual inadequacies. It's your perceived inadequacies. And that is what actually causes stress. It's your inner critic. So your stress isn't truth. It's your inner critic on a loop. And this is so key for you in being able to reduce your stress. You want to be able to surface the story. You got to surface the judgment of your inner critic. Because your mind makes the meaning, your mood follows suit. Your inner critic makes the story, stress will ensue. So what do we do with this? What is the antidote to all of this? You have learned stress is a choice. You don't have to unchoose this life to unchoose stress. Stress isn't based on what's happening around you. It's based on the story in your head. And the true source is your inner critic that's laying down some harsh self-judgment, which means that the strongest antidote for stress is actually self-acceptance. So when you fear missing a deadline, the stress isn't about the deadline. The stress is from how you judge yourself if you miss that deadline. It's a self-acceptance gap. That's where you feel the stress. Now, there's more depth here, and stick with us because I have something for you all totally free if you want to learn more about it. But I wanted to tell you a story too that's not about me. It's about somebody else that I worked with. This is Chelsea, and she was in a really critical role of a growing tech company back in 2016 when we were working together. Basically, she was running both the sales and business development, and then she was also kind of like the primary customer relationship manager. And as the company grew, her scope and her span grew, and the number of people that she was communicating with grew. And so she became more dependent on people on the team to be able to get her answers. And she would find herself in the situation frequently where she was being very conscientious and detail-oriented and responsive, and then looking to get information back and not getting it back. And it was the kind of thing where she was like, I have to follow up with people like 2, 3, 4 times in order to get a response. And she found herself just like carrying it around on her shoulders incessantly because she didn't feel like she could just send the request and trust that she would get something back. And she started to really feel resentful of the people that she was working with because, I mean, I've been there. You've probably been there too. Feels terrible. And she was at a really, really high state of stress. And it was definitely starting to impact her performance, right? Like how she was showing up, the relationship she had with people. So that's where she was when we started to work together. And she learned about the relationship that you're learning about today, the relationship between self-acceptance and stress. And in that work and really building her self-acceptance, she started to see that she had like infinite choices of how she could handle situations differently. And she realized how she could change her own narrative about what was happening in order to change her experience at work. And she was able to change how she was communicating, which created a shift in the people that she was working with. And they started to really build trust. They started to be more responsive. And she stopped feeling like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And the company started to do better and better. And they actually were acquired ahead of schedule, like 18 months ahead of their goal for when they wanted to be acquired. And this was done under Chelsea's leadership, by the way, while she had her first baby. So like she is a total rock star, and she has talked about this work as the coaching she never knew she always wanted. But you might have a similar reaction that Chelsea did and that I did when, we first learned about self-acceptance. You're probably going, Dr. Laura, I accept myself. I don't really want to accept myself. I want to improve myself. So if you're having that feeling, you're not alone. I had that same fear. What I'm about to tell you might be the most important thing that you're going to hear from me this whole hour. So if you're multitasking or anything, just focus on this for a moment. Listen, the opposite of self-acceptance isn't self-improvement. It's self-judgment. Write this down. The opposite of self-acceptance isn't self-improvement. It's self-judgment. I know that you want to focus on self-improvement. You're here, you're watching this. Of course you care about improving yourself. Of course you do. But that's a totally different dimension than judging yourself. In fact, think about it this way. You can focus on self-improvement from a self-judging lens, which is what most high achievers do. Or you can focus on self-acceptance or focus on self-improvement from a self-acceptance lens. So change your lens, change your life. When you are focused on your self-improvement from a self-accepting lens, not only do you enjoy your life more and feel less stressed out, but you actually grow faster. Self-judgment does not accelerate your growth. So learning this, figuring out, and it's actually paradox theory, we get into this more in the courses that we do, is life-changing. This was life-changing for me. That, wait a second, I can focus on self-improvement and self-acceptance at the same time. Okay, so what do you do? You're like, okay, so I get it, Dr. Laura, self-acceptance. What do I do? Well, I want to give you a tool that really helps you to unwind. Really going to learn how to unwind your self-judgment so that you can truly detox from stress. Because remember, the source of stress is your self-judgment. So I'm going to walk you through my unwind stress model and think of a situation for yourself and follow along with the steps. I'm going to go through all the questions first, so you'll see what they all are, and then I'm going to walk you through them one by one with an example. Okay, so the U is uncovered story. You want to begin with really thinking through, what is the story in your head about what might happen? You've got this stressful situation. What do you fear might happen in this situation? The N is the narrative about the story. So what is that meaning or the narrative that you're putting on the story? The W is the who you should be. And I put the should in air quotes because I'm really not a fan of people shoulding all over themselves. High achievers do this a lot, and it's a self-judgment thing. And because we're looking to surface self-judgment, we actually want to be honest about this. Who is it that you think you should be? So you've got this narrative about the situation that's challenging your ideal self-concept. So what is that ideal self-concept? What piece is being threatened? The I is for inner critic's judgment. So this is where you're starting to compare what's your ideal self that you feel like you're supposed to be, and then what is the inner critic saying is actually true. The second N is really where you put all of this together. This is the negative thought triggering the stress. So what is the self-judgment then that's triggering a stress response? This one is important because you're summarizing everything up to this point and you're really internalizing that this is a me thing and not a thing out there. And that's not about blame, it's about empowerment. And then we get to the D, which is disarming evidence. And this is my favorite part. Disarming evidence is, how can you soften the judgment? So let me give you a real example that I think will probably resonate with you. I have too much to do. Anybody ever been in that situation? Maybe feeling like you have a long to-do list? Yeah. Your to-do list gets longer as the day goes on, not shorter. Okay, so let's use this. I have too much to do. The uncovered story. As an example, I might be like, I'm going to miss a deadline. Like I committed to something and I'm going to miss it. Ugh. Okay. What's the narrative? What is the meaning that you're putting on that situation? Well, maybe it's, if I miss a deadline, I'm going to let my coworkers down. And just to help you think this through, maybe you're like, no, I'm not going to miss the deadline. I'm going to get it done, but I'm going to miss my kid's soccer game and I'm going to get only 3 hours of sleep. And that's stressing me out. right? So you can just think through, like, what is the narrative? What is the meaning that you're putting on what's happening? As you think through the story, what is the narrative? The who you think you should be. Like, I'm supposed to be reliable. Like, I am a reliable human being. So if I let them down, if I am late, if I don't get this done, they're not going to trust me anymore. So I'm supposed to be reliable. The who is like, yes, reliable is part of my self-concept. That's who I want to be. And I don't like it if I don't feel like that's happening, which really takes us to the I. So what is the inner critic saying? She's like, you're unreliable. I say she because mine's a she. She's calmed down a lot because I've really worked on my self-acceptance a lot over the last like 10, 15 years. But most of us have that inner critic, that voice that is just like, oh, you are screwing this up. This is not like, you're not reliable. You are not as good as you think you are. Like, it's painful and it's rough, but to actually unwind stress, you want to work to surface it, like listen to that mean voice enough to be able to hear it. And then the end, the second end is where you're putting it all together. So what is that negative thought that's triggering the stress? So in this example, it's like, okay, so actually I am feeling stress because part of me judges me as unreliable. And so this is where you start to see, I'm not feeling stressed because of the workload. That's out here. That's something like, I mean, maybe there's things you can do out here to change that. Sure. But if it's like, I'm being given all this work to do from my boss and I'm stressed because of it, that's out there. That's harder to shift than here. So this negative thought triggering the stress is bringing your power back. And then when we get to disarming evidence, and this is my favorite part. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples. What you're looking to do here with disarming evidence is looking back at the rest of the unwind model to say, like, is this really true? How can I challenge this? Like, maybe I'm going to miss a deadline, but do I also have evidence that I am a reliable person? Have I been reliable in many other ways, many other times? I can probably come up with a lot of examples. When I teach this model to my clients and I ask them, do you have evidence that you are reliable? Or do you have evidence that you are a good parent? Or do you have evidence that you are a good leader? They come up with it. They know, they're like, yes, absolutely, I do. Or I can look at the narrative that I'm putting on it. Instead of me saying like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna let them down. It's like, okay. Or do I believe that I can renegotiate deadlines in a way that actually builds trust? Can I approach my coworkers or my client with accountability and say, listen, it looks like I overcommitted myself. And so I just want to find out, could we push that Friday deadline to next Wednesday? Would that have an impact? What would that look like? Like, I believe I can renegotiate deadlines in a way that builds trust. Absolutely. And then maybe I'm not letting people down. Maybe I'm actually enhancing trust with that open communication. Or another example that I can learn from this mistake of overcommitting myself. Do I think I'm the only person on the planet that's ever overcommitted myself? Probably not. Do I believe I'm capable of learning from this? Do I think that I can recognize, like, you know what, I took on way too much? Noted. I'll be careful about that in the future. Okay, great. I learned something. That's kind of what life is about. And so these are examples of that disarming evidence. And so much of the work that I do is actually equipping people to have this like huge supply of disarming evidence. And you kind of know these people too. Like, you've worked with these people before, you have them in your life, these people that even when there's something kind of crazy going on or there's chaos, like they still just show up in a way that like they're calm and committed. You know, they're not like avoiding it. They're in it, but they're just like, they're okay. That's my dogs. I think they're chasing the birds out of the yard. So this is really what it comes down to, is how can you equip yourself with so much disarming evidence, so much self-acceptance, changing how you're relating to yourself, such that when these situations, these external things are happening, you can be that calm in the storm. So if you do have any questions, let me know, because I'm happy to answer anything. But I also want to give you access to something if you're interested in learning more. This unwind model, I just went through it really quickly and I gave you an example. Your ability to truly take this model and apply it to the stressful situations in your life is the most empowering thing that you can do. And your ability to focus on that disarming evidence and build up for yourself this huge arsenal of disarming evidence is life changing. So I have this course for you, and it's completely free. And I will be able to I'm going to put a link in so you guys can.
And I can also send that link out in the follow-up email.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I actually don't know.
No
I don't,
problem.
I don't think I can send a chat.
Yeah, just shoot me an email with the link and then I'll put it with the replay and the follow-up email so everyone gets access.
Perfect. Thank you, Olivia.
Mhm.
So just so you know, like what this will be. Thank you, Dev. Just so you'll know what this will be. So this is, the videos are really short. It's 4 lessons. And you're just going to kind of walk through. Each video is like 5 minutes or less. And each one has its own worksheet. So if any one of these you are feeling like a little bit stuck, the video, I'm going to walk you through like multiple examples. And there's questions on the worksheet that can really like help your brain get more clear. So the first lesson is all about figuring out how your brain is putting meaning on situations that's, bringing you stress. Lesson 2 is all about that who. It's all the self-concept stuff. Like, yeah, what is this about who I think I'm supposed to be right now that's feeling threatened? Lesson 3 is we want to get honest with the inner critic's negative judgment. It's not pleasant, but it's usually also so much easier to find that disarming evidence once you know what you're looking for. And that's that 4th lesson, which is disarming evidence. So these are the 4 lessons. So you can actually get through all of this in like 20 minutes. But what it's really important, it's not even just going through the course, it's being able to, in any situation moving forward, that you can apply that. You can always figure out like, what is the self-judgment here? And then, okay, how can I regard myself with acceptance instead? And so this is going to be the key for you to be able to rewire your mindset, really change your relationship with yourself in order to reduce and, maybe even fully eliminate stress for yourself and excel with clarity, focus, and authenticity. And I know how it's hard to like follow through sometimes. So I want you to follow through. So you have a week to do it. So if you grab it right now, get through the whole thing in like 20 minutes, it's 4 or 5 minute videos with exercises. You can apply it immediately. But it's totally free if you do it in a week. And if you do it in a week, then you're going to have access to a one-on-one with me. And the one-on-ones, I find them to be really, really powerful because I feel like people hear the model and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. But then when I'm asking them on their own, like just thinking it through from the course, sometimes having that one-on-one call is like where they can really make the connections and they start to make really, really big shifts. And I want you to have that. I want you to be able to have those shifts. Literally, like the whole world is a better place if we are less stressed out. I mean, you think about all of those impacts I was talking about of stress, like that emotional contagion. None of us is our best when we're stressed out. If we all have these narcissistic tendencies when we're stressed out, not a good situation, right? So to me, I know this sounds so lofty, but I believe it wholeheartedly. Like this kind of work will actually genuinely make the whole world a better place. So grab the course. If you get it done within a week, then we can do a one-on-one call if you want. And I'm really happy to support that. So I have like a summary slide that I want to do in closing for y'all, but just wanted to see if there are any questions before that.
I have a question which might come up in your course,
Mm-hmm.
but have you found with clients that you've worked with or people that have implemented this strategy that it's most impactful to implement like in real time? So if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, oh my God, I'm underwater. Like, should I unpack it then? Or is it more of like almost like a not meditation, but like something that you do like morning or evening at the end or beginning of your day to like level set?
I think that it's probably best at first to do it a little bit separate
Okay.
from, like the hustle and bustle. It's kind of like anything that might feel new. If you've never, shot hoops with a basketball before and you're trying to do it for the first time in a game.
Yeah. Great point.
um, so you probably, you want to do drills, like you want to kind of practice, you want to think it through. And when you can apply it to, I think by the time you've applied it to maybe 3 to 5 situations in a more kind of structured way, you're going to be able to get there faster and faster. Like I pretty much immediately know now what my self-judgment is when I feel that stress response. And it's honestly so freaking cool to be able to surface that, because I also have done so much work to build up that disarming evidence. And I'm like, am I a bad person? Am I a bad friend? Am I a bad leader? Am I a bad, like, is
Mm-hmm.
horrible negative judgment from my critic, is that real? Is that true? And it's
Mm-hmm.
so easy for me to get through that. So it doesn't mean that mean the situation goes away, but I just feel so much calmer about it. I'm like, okay, from this place, when I'm not so stressed out, I really can like see my options so much more clearly.
Totally.
Yeah.
I could see it being really valuable as well, like in transition periods, like I have little kids, right? So I'm thinking like if I'm working and then transitioning into like going to be with my kids for dinner or whatever it is, like then doing almost like level setting before you transition from one part of your life to another. Or like in the chat earlier, I saw Dove mention aging parents. It's like, okay, if you're like going from your regular day to day to then visiting parents, like doing that, or in-laws or whoever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like almost like in between like segments, because I feel like personally that's often, and as I felt like you were like talking to me directly, I'm like, oh my God, you understand. But like as a high achiever, right? Like sometimes when you get in a flow, you're like, I'm great, I'm crushing it. But then it's when that ends and you have to transition into going and working out or being a parent that you're like, oh, well, because I worked so much, now I'm bad at this, or I didn't leave enough time for this. So I
Yeah.
feel like that transition period would be a really valuable time for to like implement this logic as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such a good point. I think people can feel really torn in between, and it becomes this horrible story of like, well, I can be good in this way or I can be good in this way, but I can't be good in both. And we put ourselves in these impossible situations. And most people would also look at others in that same exact situation and not feel so judgmental of them,
Hmm.
you know, but hold them
Totally.
to a different
Well, I think we're
standard.
served content on social media, through books, like, I mean, at conferences, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen speakers or people talking about, like, you can have it all, you just can't have it all the time. You can only have so many balls in the air at once. And, like, I think sometimes there's a lot of good that, their perspective, like, maybe it's just their approach, um, but I do think that sometimes that puts us into this like dichotomy mindset of like, okay, well, I can be exceptional at this, but that means this has to fall. And I think that, I mean, as you were talking, I'm like, oh, well, that's not necessarily the case. We're just making that judgment on ourselves, saying like,
Yeah,
I have to fail at this because I'm succeeding at this. And like, that's not
absolutely.
necessarily the case.
Yeah. And even thinking through, how am I defining what it means to succeed, or how, what it means to fail? Who's
Totally.
using these metrics? Like that's one more layer of choice that we have.
Totally. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think surrounding ourselves, I feel like I talk to people about this all the time on with when it comes to social media, but like also filtering who you're surrounding yourself with. Like if you feel like you're getting more quote unquote stressed after being on social media, then maybe spend less time on social
Absolutely.
media.
Change your feed.
Totally.
I love my feed. Like I have a very curated feed, and it,
Mhm.
yeah, if there's content that I'm seeing that is contributing to my choice to judge myself, I'll let that go.
Totally.
Yeah, I'll let that go. And I
Love
can, notice what's the story in my head if I see somebody crushing it on social media. Is the story in my head like, oh, I'll never be that good, or look at
that.
that evidence of my inadequacy. Like, okay, that's where the stress comes from. If I look at it and I'm like, man, that's cool. That
Yeah.
seems like something that I really want to move toward for myself. Let's freaking go. you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
And yeah, knowing kind of where you're at with that, right? I feel like I've seen more and more content out there, whether it's from folks in the fitness industry or folks that are doing like home decor stuff, where it's like, hey, this is what someone that's like this size of a body like is doing, or this is someone who has oak cabinets in their kitchen and what my house looks like, like it's not always like this curated, like hyper successful. And so I feel like there's also, depending on where you're at in your self-acceptance journey, right? You can like maybe curate that type of content for yourself. And then once you get to the point that the content can be more aspirational and you feel good about that, it's like you can graduate and you're allowed to see other things now.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Thank you for that. And thank you for
Yeah.
your question. I don't think there's any questions that have come in through the Q&A.
Nope. No,
Okay,
I think we're good for your wrap-up slide.
awesome. All right, cool. So, so here's the summary. There are no inherent stressors, right? Stress is actually a subjective experience, which means that it's a choice. But you don't have to unchoose this life to unchoose stress. And remember that stress is that battery running on empty, and burnout is like a battery that's dead. And if you don't check your stress, it will lead you to burn out. So your mind makes the meaning, your mood follows suit. That's where a lot of your choice resides. You get to choose the meaning you're putting on the situation, because the stress is actually caused by the judgments from your inner critic, which means that higher self-acceptance is what's going to dramatically reduce stress in your life, even if you're not changing anything about the circumstances of your life. And self-acceptance and self-improvement coexist. Remember, so you can focus on self-improvement from a self-judging lens, or you can focus on it from a self-accepting lens. Change your lens, change your life. And you learned how you can unwind your stress by surfacing the story and finding all that disarming evidence. And one last thing here on this summary slide, you cannot improve your way out of stress. This is what I was doing in that opening story. But then I realized that I was full of it. Like, I kept thinking that I was going to be able to improve my way into a different set of circumstances or a different state or like a level of arrived, and then my stress would go away. And that's not how it works. In fact, my favorite quote around self-acceptance comes from Dr. Robert Holden. And he says, no amount of self-improvement can make up for any lack of self-acceptance. Let that sink in. No amount of self-improvement can make up for any lack of self-acceptance. So self-acceptance is the key to everything you want to be, and it's the key to everything you're meant to be. So thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. This was amazing. I wanted to give you one moment because I was peeking on your website before we hopped on. Is you have a book?
Yeah.
Is it in real life yet, or are we getting on a wait list?
Yeah, no, the book actually came out in 2021.
Okay,
Um,
amazing.
and it's actually about company culture. So I mentioned, starting my career at NASA,
Yeah.
and how there were self-awareness gaps for the mission managers and the
Mhm.
engineers, that they could have done something to prevent the tragedy. So we talk a lot about company culture and how self-awareness really drives truly effective cultures.
Amazing. Okay. I wasn't sure. I filled out the form on your website to like get more, but I didn't see a link to purchase it. So that's why I was
Okay.
curious. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include that in the follow-up as well because I know, yeah, after listening to you, I'm like, okay, now what more? What are the next steps? Like
Yeah, what do we do?
definitely, definitely want more.
Yeah,
So thank
we'll
you
do
so
that
much.
unwind course for sure. Like, that's the most relevant to this
Perfect.
session.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I'll be sure to send this all out to our entire email list. So that way everyone, even people that weren't able to join us today, can watch the recording and they could do the course and chat with you. And then, yeah, we hope to have you back again sometime. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.